Hi, my name's Ted Dintersmith. I am super excited to be meeting with this group in January. My goal here is to give a little bit of background to make our conversation more productive, more focused, and I hope more interesting. I'm also just a huge fan of Eric Mazur and have been for years. And so particularly interested in anything he's involved with, but something involved with high school education, high school science, high school physics, near and dear to my heart. So I'll start with my background and I'll give you a more physics enhanced version of it than I do for normal audiences. So I grew up in Northern Virginia, went to public schools there. In some ways, I mean, I'm sure all of you are amazing science teachers, and I wish I had had you when I was in middle and high school, but I didn't. I had fairly formulaic science classes. I couldn't stand dissecting, so biology fell by the wayside. My last bio course was in middle school. I didn't particularly like chemistry labs, so that really didn't get me going. And so physics was sort of the last pillar standing. And when I got to college, I decided to take physics courses with a real thinking of majoring in physics, which I ended up doing. And it got more and more interesting to me the further I got into it. I'd say, though, that one of the things that was my real strength, and it showed up in math and physics, and I'll get into why I think it's a bit of a false positive, was, give me an SAT math type problem. I was in my zone, something fairly mechanical, fairly limited in time, no conceptual aspect to it or challenge, nothing creative required, just sort of replicate in your mind a procedure you had seen in a textbook or in a lecture. Boy, I could do those, and I didn't make mistakes, and I was fast. So anyway, that took me into college. It really got particularly interesting for me my senior year, where I went to college. I was at the College of William and Mary. There was an opportunity to do independent research. And so I did independent research on a physics problem. I had a great professor there, took on the challenge over the course of a school year, and it was an entire school year and immersive, coming up with an analytic model, a closed form model to predict the scatter plot of outcomes in a low energy atomic physics collision. And so that's what I did. It was back in the days when we did have computers. It wasn't an abacus or a slide rule, but you had to submit punch cards. I had my closed form model. I had to do a numeric, integration. Kept sending those decks in time and again, and eventually got it to compile. My model was quite accurate. That led to a couple of publications in JPhys Review, which is pretty good for an undergraduate. And then I headed off to graduate school, and I started in graduate school at Stanford in physics. And I was sort of torn a bit because I liked the physics aspect. Certain aspects were particularly interesting to me. I really wanted to be good at what I was going to do. And I also liked the connection physics made between real world phenomena and an abstract representation that could help us understand and even predict how the real world behaves. And so I completed my first year at Stanford. I sort of felt like that strength of mind of being able to do the mechanics quickly without making mistakes had very little to do with being a great physicist. And I was surrounded by some great physicists. I just sort of looked at it and said, I don't think it's in my future to be somebody doing the most path-breaking research. I am not destined for the path of an Eric Mazur. And I really wasn't that interested in being a mediocre physicist. And so I took that summer off, which was a very interesting summer after my first year of graduate school, and worked with a tiny little firm in the Washington, D.C. area that was using systems analytic techniques, math models, to predict, some social science phenomena, particularly in the area of education. Come back to that. But now this is very interesting. I worked with a guy there, and this name may be familiar to some of you, but I worked closely with a guy there named Hugh Everett. And Hugh Everett is famous for the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And so it was just a fascinating guy. And we ended up with a lot of discussions about that. I returned to graduate school, actually switched out of physics to a math modeling program that was focused on a wider range of things you could produce math models or create math models for. And so some of it was physics-based. I did a big project there on modeling the risks of liquefied natural gas storage tanks and tankers, which had a lot of physics to it, but that was a really interesting project. But it covered financial systems and biological systems, and just kind of anything in the real world that you might be able to capture with math. That's what that program was about. That's where I ended up getting my PhD. Probably my last real connection to physics as I went forward in life. My first job was with a company called Analog Devices, and I ended up being part of and then running a business unit there that was doing digital signal processing, fast math chips. And that meant I had to understand and use and be able to explain things like digital representations of fast Fourier transforms or digital filtering, a whole range of signal processing algorithms. And I really had somewhat of an advantage with a strong physics background. So that was sort of my background. I went from there to venture capital, spent 25 years in venture capital, and then have spent the last decade plus on the issue of school. And I will try to briefly summarize my issues about school. I'm a strong advocate for a very different version of school, just wholesale reimagining of school. My concerns came out of observing what was going on with my own kids initially, but I've since been to probably 1,000 schools, traveled all over the country, been to every state, met with a ton of people, created film, produced and funded films, written a couple books, give talks, have a resource to try to help schools move forward in safe, confidence building ways to be more forward leaning. And my core issue is this, is what I observed, and I think it's true to this day, that if you are in most school settings, that if you're really good at memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, and following instructions, you will excel. And when I visit a school, I'll ask them that. I'll say, put a new student in tomorrow. They're good at these three narrow things: memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, following instructions. My bet is they'll be on your honor roll. And the answer invariably is, you're right. And the point I make is that's exactly what machine intelligence does perfectly, instantly, for free. And what we really need to be doing is to equip kids with the skills and competencies and mindsets to identify problems they want to go after, take on challenges they find interesting, manage and direct their own skills, talents, leverage outside resources, create bold initiatives, perhaps on their own, perhaps working with others, try a million different things as they try to get something they're really proud of, and then ultimately produce something that they can explain why they feel it was great work and why it affects positive change in some way in their community. And so you can check out, and we'll get to you, pointers to the signature film I produced called Most Likely to Succeed. I think I'm donating through you guys my book, What School Could Be, about examples of great things I see in the field. And then I'll get back to why I think this could be interesting. We have a community-based platform called whatschoolcouldbe.org. Sort of think of it as Facebook without the ads or scuzziness, that brings together innovative teachers to create the kinds of learning challenges that will engage kids, help them learn important long-term competencies, and ultimately uplift them into lives of purpose and fulfillment. So that's my school focus, and it really has been my entire life's work for the last decade or so. What I want to close with, and I think these would be fertile aspects for discussion, is that I feel like for me, my physics background in school, it was better than my biology or chemistry background, and ultimately over time was quite helpful. But as I travel and I see what's going on in most schools, I feel like we're missing out, and that there are many opportunities that could really engage kids in important ways and show many kids, like tap kids' inherent interest in science. I always say, what 4- and 5-year-old isn't interested in insects or plants or doesn't love running around in the woods? I mean, kids love science until we sort of crush it out of them. And what can we do to make sure that their science background not only is sending more kids toward a science career, which would be a really good thing, but is broadly beneficial? And some of the things on my mind, this is where it's sort of like there's an aspect of this that's an open challenge to this group. I have tried to get some big corporations, particularly Intel, interested in putting together a course for middle school kids that has one goal and one goal only. That over the period of a school year, students' interest in science will go up considerably. So no tests, no grades, no nothing. We are just going to teach a course that goes from subatomic physics all the way up to the universe, that covers aspects of chemistry, that covers aspects of biology, from the gene to ecosystems, that covers a full gamut of really fascinating science concepts, physics concepts, that just gets kids at age 12 and 13 super excited about science. And I honestly don't know what the downside is to that relative to what we do today. So for those of you, particularly those of you in middle school, if I have any takers, I often make grants. I'm willing to work with a group of you, and let's see if we could put something together to make science incredibly interesting for kids. And particularly, by the way, I excelled. I was drawn to it because I could do low-level math procedures quickly without mistakes, which I view today, looking back, as largely a false positive. There are so many kids who have great science gifts that conventional or traditional school doesn't value. They think creatively or conceptually. I don't see that being valued anywhere in our education track, including college physics courses, particularly including AP physics. Kids that are really good with their hands, that could do great science experiments in the lab. I was with some of the top scientists at Stanford, and every time a science person in physics, in biology or chemistry gets a Nobel Prize for something experimental, I often feel that prize probably should have gone to, or at least part of the credit should have gone to, the lab technicians, because they're the ones who had to actually make it work in practice. And those kids often are discouraged from pursuing science tracks. So making science engaging, making physics engaging to the extent you're doing it, and I bet this group is doing that particularly well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if we can help others do that, that would be even better. The second thing that I think is really interesting about science is to get away from one right answer questions. I feel like so much of our curriculum, particularly in physics and math, is driven by the needs of the test designers. And test designers can't stand ambiguous questions. So they will like, in a physics setting, you take a ball, at the top of a building that's X feet high, assume no friction, drop it off the edge of the building. How many seconds will it take before it hits the ground? Can't look up the formula to calculate the descent to that object. And, A, 12 seconds, B, 14.2 seconds, C, okay, most kids look at that and just say, wow, that's not very interesting. We could do things that are more engaging, more ambiguous, more drawing on the fact, many great physicists are incredibly good at rough estimates or ballpark estimates, and so physics challenges like, how many atoms are in, a soccer ball, or, how many stars are in the universe. There are a million open-ended things where there is not one right answer, where you will never find them on a standardized test designed by people like the College Board, that actually are engaging, inviting, and value kids' ability to think logically about things. I also think being able to understand that the world is imprecise, and that physics gives you a way to predict how things will behave in an imprecise world, with a prediction that won't be exact, but will be relatively accurate. And so just one hop over from dropping a heavy object off of the top of a building and assuming no friction is, let's drop a heavy object off the top of a building, have it partway down, bounce off of something that's slanted, like a slanted awning or something, boom, 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 and down. Can we use physics to model how long it will take that object before it hits the ground? Well, that's a hard problem, but it's a really interesting problem, and it helps people connect, students in particular, connect the fact that physical abstractions can help you gain insight into the world and predict things that are uncertain, that we won't be exact. It's a messy problem, but that's the real power of math and physics. Third thing is that I would love to see this group, and I may hold the record. I may even hold the record above Eric in terms of the number of times I've asked people to weigh in on this particular Eric Mazur concept test. So maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. I love this, and I'm going to tell you why. So there it is. You've got a rectangular metal plate, circular hole in the middle, visualize the size of a quarter, put it in an industrial heating oven, heat it up slowly. What happens to the diameter of the hole? Increases, stays the same, decreases. I have asked that to so many people. And you know what? Not one has said, well, I'm not a science person. Not one has said, well, science is boring. Not one has said, well, I don't have an industrial sheet with a hole in it in my office, so I'm not interested in this. Everybody gets excited about it. What I find so interesting about this problem, and I've been with Eric, we were at a big R&D center outside of Boston in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with Google engineers, all of whom have PhDs in math or science, and asked this question. They were guessing. I asked this question of somebody who for 25 years was chair of the material science department of a top university, 25-year chair of material science. He got it wrong. I got it wrong. Who gets it right? You know, emergency medical technicians, auto mechanics, plumbers. And, so two observations. One is we need to respect people who understand the real world as we teach science. It would be an amazing thing to bring in an electrician as we're covering electricity and magnetism, and have a master electrician come into the class and explain how they do certain things that are vital and key in their profession to make sure we're all safe, to make sure circuitry is properly wired, to make sure fuses work properly, and why a fuse works the way it works and why it's important, so that kids first understand that the science has real implications. But second, we collectively start to respect the value of so many professions that by and large we look down on, I think. I mean, unfortunately, my dad was a carpenter, so I know firsthand how somebody without a high school degree who's a carpenter doesn't feel valued in a society and a community the same way somebody with a college degree is. And I think that's just wrong, but I think we can connect it. But here's another challenge for this group. Wouldn't it be so great if some subset of this group put together a weekly Eric Mazur challenge? Maybe we follow the typical high school physics curriculum flow, and each week offer a new one, like what I just showed you. We could all join. A little bit of plug, but it's all free, so this isn't a commercial advertisement. But this whatschoolcouldbe.org website, I'd love you to join it. Check it out. We've got all sorts of resources there to help students begin to own and direct their own learning, to connect the learning more to the real world, to, in schools, create more caring and connected communities, to get school communities excited about innovation, a lot of things. We don't have a physics forum in that. So we could set up a private group called the Mazur Physics Academy or something, and have a few volunteers come up with weekly challenges and really get kids to think conceptually about things, to recognize how science in the classroom is connected to the real world, to debate each other in the great ways that Eric does in his classroom. So again, if we get a few volunteers and you need some money to support this, I'm in. And the final thing I think is really important about physics going forward is to look for opportunities to give kids the ability to do some original work on their own. And I know that sounds like, man, we got to hold off till graduate school for that to happen, but that's just not true. And I think if we think broadly and expansively, we could challenge our middle and high school kids to do more of what some kids do for, these science fairs, which I think science fairs are absolutely great ways to learn about science, but to ask kids maybe to work in teams on great projects in the context of their normal coursework, and get them excited about how science can empower them going forward, whether they actually pursue a field in the, science-based profession, ideally become great science teachers, which is something we need so much to really make sure that our kids are equipped for the world they're going to be adults in, or whether they just plain find the fascination and intrinsic beauty of science. And so anyway, so that's what I wanted to say in this short intro. Maybe it's not that short, but anyway, this intro. I look forward to meeting with you in January. We'll have a great discussion, kind of despite me, because you guys are amazing. But I'm really grateful to you during a really challenging school year to take time to convene together. I often say innovation is a team sport. And I think if we're going to be more innovative in the way we get kids excited about science and really learning core science principles, we need to be innovative. And this is the right group to do it. And again, huge gratitude for Eric for his leadership in so many areas, but particularly for his leadership in education. I often say to him, he ought to be dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I think if we could clone him, that's exactly what would happen. So thanks for all you're doing. Look forward to talking to you in mid-January. And I am excited about what your group is doing and what potential this group has.
I'm Eric Mazur. I'm the PI on the NSF grant that funds the PoLS-T network, a network of high school, a global network. It was meant to be much more US-centric, but it's completely global now, and it's kind of reflected by the attendance here today. A global network of high school teachers, physics high school teachers, basically to connect with each other and to support each other in this very important endeavor of teaching physics to the next generation of citizens of society in an increasingly technology-dominated society where people should know about physics the same way they can speak their own native language, I think. Anyway, I'm absolutely delighted that today we have Ted Dintersmith, an author, film producer, and innovation expert. I don't remember exactly, Ted, when it was that we met, but we've intersected over the past at least decade, if not most. And Ted is someone who abounds with passion about education and democracy. And he's a physicist too. I mean, I think if there are two types of physicists that are truly influential in society, it's first of all you, the high school teachers, because you lay the foundation for the next generation of citizens. And secondly, people like Ted, who have this passion for, people developing the type of skills that are necessary to be a citizen of the 21st century, rather than, as you allude to in your talk, essentially being nothing more than a computing device. Ted's films, books, keynotes, and philanthropy focus on the urgency of reimagining school to address essentially to the increasing pace of change in society, and especially how technology is sort of making certain skills much less relevant in the 21st century than they were up to now. Ted is the founder and chairman of whatschoolscouldbe.org, an organization that is catalyzing progress at the high school, district and state level across America and in countries around the globe. His professional career centered on innovation, including being ranked as the top performing US venture capitalist for the years 1995-1999. And in 2012, he was appointed by President Obama to represent the US at the United Nations General Assembly. What a great honor to have you here, Ted. And thank you also so much for your generosity in giving out copies of your book to the audience here. Thank you also, Ted, for a wonderful talk that clearly resonated with the people in the audience here. I'm going to lead off with a few questions, but I'm sure that many of you have questions following up on your viewing of the talk. So I suggest that you hit this raise hand button, click the reactions button at the bottom and raise hand to get into the queue of asking questions. You're of course also more than welcome to put your questions in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat when I'm not speaking, but maybe raising your hand and speaking up is more fun than just typing in the question. So Ted, as I said, there were lots of comments on your talk. I urge you to actually go and have a look at them. There are several people who signed up for your proposal, by the way. So I definitely think you should close the loop and get in touch with them. Like many people who watch your talk, I love the idea of going beyond machine intelligence. You contrast excelling by memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, and following instructions with developing the type of skills and mindsets that we need in the 21st century, namely focusing on the things that our mobile phones cannot do. And I think the reactions range from, I'm already doing that in my class, to yes, but how do we fit that into the curriculum that is imposed on us? And there were a couple of remarks that I would like to identify and get your reaction to. Elizabeth England and Scott Wingington, and I think both are here. Scott is actually connecting from South Korea at 1 a.m. Thank you so much for doing that, Scott. In a discussion towards the end of your talk, they allude to fears, parental fears and other fears, right? I think one of them said, I'm quoting here, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I'm reading the note I took. We would do anything not to jeopardize our children's futures, even in the slightest. So experimenting with the formula is very scary. And kids know this too, as is made very clear in your film. That's a huge hurdle to overcome, right? I mean, as teachers, we're all sort of, responsible for our students' future. So how do we overcome this fear?
Yeah, let me dive in. But first, if you don't mind, I'd just like to send a big thank you to you for your work, Eric, because as you know, I'm a huge fan. I've been to your classes and observed those many times, but every single major thing I've done, my books, my film, I always find a way to get you in that. I think you're the only person in all of them. And so I could write a book on, ants in Zimbabwe, and I'd figure out a way to get Eric Mazur in that book. So, anyway, it's been terrific. I'm a parent, and so I come at this from that angle. I mean, my kids are kind of up and running at this point, but there, without question, and understandably, there is a large amount of risk aversion in the system. And if you're a parent, you want great things for your kid. And if something's different, I think understandably, are quite nervous about that. And, it cascades down into legislators kind of reflect what parent community thinks, and on and on. The point I make is when the ground rules have shifted dramatically, when the economy and the demands for citizenship today really don't look at all like they did when I got out of high school. I got out of high school, dating myself, I got out of high school in 1970. In 1970, the universe was defined by companies that had very few creative, inventive people and lots of people and jobs that were just kind of doing the same old thing over and over. And if you go back in time and look at the very intent behind the design of our education system, it was really, and this sounds so harsh, I hate to say it, but it's true, was to train young adults to do routine tasks over and over again and not be bored out of their mind. That is basically the way it was designed. And that was actually a pretty great design for most of the last century. It's just when everything's different, we need more inventive, creative kids, and we need to let them go deep on the topics they care a lot about, and let them create something that doesn't look like the kid at the desk next to them, or the classroom down the hall, or a school in another state or country. And that's my issue with education, is it tends to, because we obsess about the data, you'll hear this all the time, we need the data. And I think it's a fair indictment of US education policy to say we spent 30 years collecting data on questions that have almost nothing to do with preparing kids for career and citizenship, that only give us the graphs and charts that tell us we're making no progress. I mean, something's really wrong with that. And so that's why I love what you're, and just to close a loop on it, I go to your classes. I mean, they're alive. I mean, it's not just, I'm going to brag a little. Not only are Eric's classes alive with discussion and energy and engagement, I've been with Eric to a room full of 1,000 adults where he put one of his thought-provoking challenges up, and it was like, a Super Bowl party. I mean, like, these people are people are curious, people are interested, people want to be challenged. And the more we're doing that, and I know a number of people on this chat do that terrifically with their kids. I would just say that those happen in bits and pieces. They're here, there, but not the mainstream of what's happening in our classrooms. And they're differentially not happening for the kids that need the most support. And so that's defines my, my calling, the work I do, and what I get excited about.
So I see already one hand up, and maybe I had a follow-up question, but let's first turn to the audience here. Joe, you have your hand up. Please introduce you briefly for those of you who don't know you.
Yeah, I'm actually a retired physics professor. I've done Eric's work for a long time. And now I work with K-12 teachers to try to improve what's going on in the classroom and to get them to think more creatively about science. So the thing I wanted to mention was at the tail end of your talk, when you were talking about respecting the work of people across the board, and making students more aware of how science shows up in lots of places, and problems show up in lots of places. And what I wanted to bring to your attention is a thing called Science Capital that's being done by the people at University College London, in which with a small tweak of what you do in the classroom, you can begin to engage students more in thinking about how their science shows up in their world. And so therefore they begin to identify with it. And it's really a matter, and it even has a justice component, because it's really a matter of teachers getting to know the background of their students and then drawing on the existing background knowledge of the students to raise issues about science. That's a really cute program, neat program.
Yeah, I'll check that out. No, and thanks for the suggestion.
I forgot that I muted myself. Thank you, Joe. And I see that John Ritter has his hand up. So please go ahead, John.
Yes, I'm John Rader. I teach physics at the Calhoun School in New York City, and I've been teaching the active physics program there to ninth graders since 1994. And I sort of got in on the ground floor of the program and was involved with some of the early workshops. And they interviewed me for making some how-to videos. And ever since then, I've been interested in how documentaries are made. So my question concerns how you made your film.
Oh, good.
And when you make documentaries, you're not doing from a script. You have to take existing footage or what you get people to say on camera and construct a story from that. And I was interested in how you ended up doing that. And in particular, you cite at the end of your film a lot of other schools that you visited. And I was wondering if you visited those schools and took as much footage there as you did at High Tech High, and then decided that High Tech High was the school that was going to be the basis for your story. Or did you single out High Tech High as the one to do at the beginning?
Oh, great question. So for those who haven't seen it, I think I've given you guys a link to it, or we can get it to you. It's most likely to succeed. And it's timely because Thursday was the kickoff of Sundance. And so we premiered at Sundance 7 years ago. So the history of the film, when I got really interested in education, I thought about priorities for me and what kind of strategy might make sense. And I felt like if I started with a film, that it had the potential to reach lots of people and help people visualize something. But I knew nothing about film. And if you love the film, and I think almost everybody who's seen it loves it, the credit goes entirely to the director. It's a guy named Greg Whiteley. Since then, he's won multiple Emmys. He did the series on Netflix, Last Chance You and Cheer. Wonderful, wonderful person. But I was sort of like feeling my way in the dark on this, trying to figure out, well, how the heck do I go about being part of a documentary? I started calling, chasing down people, trying to find a great director. And it took me really 6 months to find Greg. people might find our first conversation interesting. So I called Greg and I said, I've got this great idea for a documentary. These are the people you should interview, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, kind of in that order, because I think they're going to talk about these things. That would make a great documentary. And he said to me, that would be a terrible documentary. He said, people, Eric will relate to this with his "Don't Lecture Me" t-shirts. He says, people don't want to watch a film that talks at them, particularly a film that presumes to tell them what they should conclude. So he said, point me in, he called them fishing holes. He said, point me in some places that might be interesting, fund me, support me, but trust me to find the story that will make the case. And that's what I did. And, the other thing that's interesting about the film is that I didn't know anything about documentaries. So I said, Greg, what's your view on education? And he said, well, I've always been interested in it. Seems to me it's really simple, right? It's, more drilling, more test prep, higher test scores, and more years of being in school, and that everything will be fine. And I said, well, that seems like kind of a bad idea. So it's a bad idea on documentaries meets a bad idea in education. But in many ways, the film is his personal journey, which doesn't really come out, because as he started filming in these different places, his thinking, and became quite personal for him with his own kids, shifted a lot. And that sort of is a backstory of the film. But the other thing about the film, first of all, anybody thinking about a documentary, I'd say the following: it is very easy to make a mediocre documentary. Don't bother. They just get lost in the noise, and it's not worth all the effort to have, something that a few hundred people see. But also you need to be prepared to budget at least as much for outreach if it's a social change film. And, so I funded the film, but I also funded a very active outreach. I turned down Netflix after Sundance, and we went directly to school communities with the film. And we're over 10,000 school community film screenings in over 30 countries. I mean, it's been seen in every prefecture in Japan. It's been seen by this is I think noteworthy, and just for those who haven't seen the film, it shows kids working collaboratively on complicated cross-disciplinary projects, a lot of physics in it. They're having to design this big mechanical wheel, but learn all about torque and friction. And they work and try things and they fail, and then try things and fail. It's just like you look at it and everybody says, oh my gosh, this would be great. The place that's seen it the most, China. They for a period of time, until I said, I'm not really comfortable with you guys doing it this way, they were doing these online screenings. 10 to 25,000 people at a time were watching that film. They are super serious about rethinking education priorities. Will they do it? I don't know. And to your question about schools, I just sort of said, these are 12. I actually made him do a whole different cut where he showed multiple schools. And he said, you're not going to like it. I said, we really need to show lots of different schools. He said, you're not going to like it, but I'll do it. He did it. I didn't like it because it diluted down the characters. And so we really zeroed in on 2 students and 4 teachers. And by the end, they're like your best friends, and you follow their journeys and their ups and downs and their struggles. And you just see when kids are engaged, when they love what they're taking on, when they're challenged to do amazing things, they rise to those challenges. And I think another thing that comes out loud and clear in that film is the importance of trusting teachers to craft the lessons in ways they think work for their kids. And that is also underscored in the film. And so I'm really proud of the film, even though it was Greg's film, so I can be proud of somebody else's work, but it's been really great. And I think about doing other documentaries from time to time, but it really takes a sort of a lightning in the bottle to get that kind of story. And so I've put some money in other things that just didn't really get me that excited with where they went, but that one worked out, and I was really happy that it did.
Well, the lady who interviewed me said she had to take 30 times the footage that she would actually use. If Greg Whatley went to all these other schools, I'm sure you had much more than 30 times the footage you actually used.
Yeah, we had 900 hours times 2 cameras, because we had a team of 4 everywhere. So 900 hours distilled down to 90 minutes. And but we also, I caught him at a great point in his career where he had the bandwidth, and just supported it for 2 years. And we got really lucky because we were at the school where we ended up centering the story on day one. So, they filmed these students their first day of school, and then they stayed with them, not just through the big public exhibition, but there were some things that happened afterwards that were pretty miraculous. The film team was there start to finish, and then finish plus, many weeks. And so that was a real, unexpected but great outcome for us.
Thank you.
I had never heard that story, Ted. I learned something new here. It's very impressive how you managed not only to fund the film but also its distribution. Did I hear it correctly that you refused Netflix after Sundance?
Yeah, I got offers from several, and the film did really well. I mean, it was 25 major film festivals. We're one of the few films that had premieres at Sundance, Tribeca, AFI, and South by Southwest EDU. So we sort of ran the table on film festivals, but it was when you dump it in, a streamer like that, and they were smaller then, but they were still, large enough. It didn't accomplish what I felt was the most important contribution we could make, which is it sort of plays to the things I think we all believe in when it comes to education, is that using it as a vehicle to bring groups together and then engage in these really spirited discussions afterward, that was quite powerful. And if it's just sitting there on Netflix and somebody watches it at home, they resonate with it. People generally love the film. So, but if you see it alone, you don't realize there are a lot of other people in my school community who see things the same way. And so we used it sort of as a crystallizing point. And then the other thing, and I give Greg the credit for this, is he went out of his way not to say, look at this school, it's way better than your school, copy it. He said, here's something really different, too new, too early, who knows, but you live and breathe the lives of these kids. And as I say, if you haven't watched it, watch it, because there's a ton of physics in the film. He says, make up your own mind. What do you think? And what he said to me, because I pushed him, honestly, I'm like, here I was quite wrong. I said, why are we, beating around the bush? Like they've got a long waiting list. They do better on the state scores. All their kids get in their top choice colleges. You should just tell people this is great. And he said, and he was so right, he said, if you presume to make up people's minds for them, they will resist you. They will take issue with you. If you show them something and respect their ability to make up their own mind, you'll find people really engaged. They may not reach the same conclusions that you would love them to make, but they'll be motivated and they'll feel respected. And it will prompt great, positive, uplifting community discussion. Whereas if you start to say this is bad and this is good, you start to draw battle lines, and it makes setting conditions for change much harder.
There's actually a whole discussion about, people being sad that it's sort of viewed very broadly in Japan and China, but that it's much more fragmented in the US.
If you don't mind, this is what I think is interesting, but this is what we do to our kids. I want to tell this story. Is that the very first community screening I did in the US, some of the people from the school were at the premiere and they just begged me, you got to do one, you got to do one, you got to do one. So I said, fine, but why the urgency? Okay, in a second, you'll see why the urgency is. So I say, okay, I'll do this. As soon as I say the name, some of you may recognize it, Gunn High School in Palo Alto. We did a community screening. They had a big auditorium. They said, we think we'll get a lot of people to come. I said, how big is your auditorium? They said 850. I said, you'll never get 850. Next update, that's full. Can we stream it in the gym? I said, sure. So they had like 1,500 people for the community screening. Why? Okay, why? This was the year they had 5 student suicides. When do the suicides happen? When SAT scores come back, when early decision letters come back, when final acceptance letters come back. Kids that were just kids that everybody thought were happy, joyful, wonderful kids. They had to put security guards up at the Caltrain crossing. And I think that in some ways exemplifies the power of kids working collaboratively on things they love and taking real joy out of their learning and creating something they're proud of, versus the rat race we put kids through. And different communities, different schools have different challenges. And I write about that. And I think I have a decent understanding, but I think at a certain point, we all are getting a collective wake-up call about, what we're doing to kids in school and whether it's really healthy for them and preparing them for career and citizenship.
But I'm sort of picking up on a comment that Amy Johnson made in the chat. I mean, maybe that at this point, having screened it publicly many times, a novel avenue, at least to reach more people in the US, would be Netflix. She says, when a teacher like myself sees it alone, I'm likely to bring this to my school and suggest that we watch it and talk about it as staff. So maybe something to consider.
Well, no, it's free on Amazon Prime. I met with Reed Hastings a couple years ago, and he said just put it on YouTube. Reed and I are not totally on the same wavelength. Reed is a better test scores or better education guy, and so we had a nice dinner together. But he was like, I'm not, but it's also on our site. It's free. I mean, like I make it available. Anybody wants it for free, or if they need a DVD, they just reach out to. I mean, it's everything I do is free, and so. And it's on our site. And if you just Google my name and Most Likely to Succeed, you'll find the link for it for free. I think we gave it to you guys, and it still is going strong. We're doing a big event next Tuesday night. It's the 7th anniversary of the Sundance premiere. We've got 2 online screenings we're doing with, guests and everything. So it's sort of like, I call it It's a Wonderful Life of education movie. So it's just sort of like, it's fresh and there's nothing dated or aging out of it. It just shows kids learning under circumstances that they're totally motivated, teachers teaching under circumstances where they feel trusted, and everybody feeling like, man, this is really exciting.
I was muted again. So another thing that I did not know. So we should get the word out. Thank you so much for that, Ted. Okay, so one of the things that I'm so excited about this PoLS-T network is that we have participants from all over the world. I was singling out South Korea because of the time difference, but we have quite a few people from Europe too, including from the founding of this network. A number of very active participants from Bulgaria. Fabian, you're the next one in line with your hand up. He is one of our Bulgarian network members. By the way, the network, which is funded by the NSF Physics program, as I mentioned, now has it started as a very small idea for a 20-person workshop, and then the pandemic derailed that whole idea. We pivoted online and then realized that we could grow much faster and broader, and we now have over 600 members. Fabian, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. I'm Fabian Kunis, and I'm a teacher from Bulgaria. I really like your talk, and my question is, first of all, I'm absolutely agree that in order to ignite students' interest in science, we should give the students more realistic problems, more health problems. But many teachers think that if we give them hard problems, they don't have exact solutions, and it's very difficult for assessment because the standard tests don't use they use some standard problems, like we have potential energy and kinetic energy and the conservation of energy. So my question is how we can implement realistic problems in curriculum. What do you think, how we can do it?
Yeah, well, one of the phrases I use that I love is that in a desert, it doesn't take a lot of rain to make the flowers bloom. And, Eric's probably posed more of his challenges to people than anyone else by a large amount, but I might be second, right? I mean, I've asked people all the time. I'll tell you some anecdotes. There's one of the things that I picked up when I observed a class with Eric was this, you've got a uniform sheet of copper, you cut a hole in it, the center of the sheet, a hole the size of a quarter, you put it in a industrial heating oven, slowly raise the heat. What happens to the size of the hole? Well, first of all, I mean, like people are just, nobody ever says, I don't like science, go away. Nobody ever says, I'm not good at science. Nobody ever said, I've asked that, gosh, across collective audiences, tens of thousands of people, nobody's ever said, stop boring me with this. Their minds just sort of kick in, right? They just start. One other anecdote that I think is really telling is I asked that of a guy that was the 25-year-long chair of a top university's material science department who got it wrong. And when I ask car mechanics or emergency medical technicians, they always get it right. So there's that whole different discussion we might want to have about the disconnect between who really understands science and who thrives in an AP universe, memorized Kirchhoff's law, Coulomb's law type of setting. But even just one of those, that's why I'm so excited about some sort of and there are great resources out there, Science Capital, I'm going to check that out. But I find that the biggest challenge in our schools with science is that it's too many kids just think it's boring. None of us think it's boring. We all know it's fascinating. Ask people what happens to the size of the hole. Nobody says that's boring. I mean, no one. And so, while I might want to do a wholesale, complete top to bottom change in education. And when I started, honestly, that was my thinking. It was like, there's not a lot about what's going on today that makes sense. We need to just blow the thing entirely up. That'll work. Actually, when people started watching the film and saying, we're going to change everything, within 6 months, they'd come back and either say, we called it off or I was fired, right? Complicated systems with ingrained patterns of behavior and external expectations about what it will do don't change like that. And so what school could be resource is all about small steps that lead to big change. But I'd say there, even if we just had one of those thought provokers a week that got people thinking, well, this is actually cool. This actually makes me think. And also, by the way, might well take the kid that's the A+ student because they can do low-level math procedures quickly without making a mistake, who's consistently wrong about those thoughtful challenges. And the kid that is otherwise spending his time or her time in vocational education kind of says, oh, no, that'll give it away, but that hole gets bigger. And everybody's saying, oh, it doesn't get bigger. And he says, well, here's why I know it gets bigger. I have to take brake rotor plates off of cars and I have to heat it, it gets bigger, trust me. And you say, well, that kid, I didn't think of that kid as being really smart. That kid's really smart. The other thing, while we're on Bulgaria, if you don't mind, I'm doing a lot right now with Ukraine and Brazil. And for those in other countries, I'll offer this. One of my good friends is Pasi Sahlberg, who architected all the changes in Finland. And I think you all know the Finland story. I mean, it's been remarkable progress. Here's what I think is interesting about Finland's progress. The best thing that happened to Finland for education was when they had a massive national budget crisis, when they were short on money. We all think that we need more money to innovate. The best thing that happened in Finland is a financial crisis that drained the coffers of money. Why? They couldn't afford to keep testing their kids. And so suddenly the testing, yoke was off, and they just said, we're not testing. Let's challenge our kids to do thoughtful, interesting things in creative, differentiated ways. And boom, 10 years later, they were at the top of the PISA score, which is not a bad test. There are some tests that are not very good, and some that are downright awful. But PISA tests kind of get us some thought-provoking things. And it's so powerful to think of the fact that we all think innovation is going to cost a lot more money. I think that's not true. We think that the most innovative things will, way too often in education, we say to the people in the field doing amazing work, do everything you were doing before and now do more. Think about Common Core. Do everything you did before, but here's another 2 hours a day because I know you're just twiddling your thumbs and have massive amounts of free time. Well, no, but when you start to say, let's give kids more responsibility for picking what they want to learn, help kids get good at the skills to critique and coach up and encourage each other, let kids weigh in on their collective assessments. It actually frees up teacher time, restores more joy to the profession, and kids learn more. And I think it's fair to say, but you have to be willing to walk away from, I need to compare a kid in Lincoln, Massachusetts to a kid in Bulgaria to a kid in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, because the only way you can compare those kids is if they're studying the exact same thing in anticipation for the exact same test. And to me, that's it. I mean, I often make the comment that our policymakers, this is true in the US, but it's probably generally true. We have people in policy positions that care a lot more about data than children. And if you're going to dwell on and obsess on the data, you're going to probably drive real learning and joy out of the school and the classroom.
That is such an important point, and actually, that was quite a discussion thread on Perusall, right? I mean, so this is related in a sense to accountability, right? The type of skills that you promote are not easily measurable on the short term, and definitely not easily measurable on the short term. Maybe you could take a student 30 years later and see, what has this person achieved, or what has the impact been of this person on society, and since that's neither easy nor very feasible, and also way beyond the planning horizon of politicians and administrators, we resort to measuring things that are easily measured and unfortunately not very meaningful. I mean, I keep reminding people, easy metrics, probably useless metric. So how do we go beyond that feeling that we have to measure, we have to rank, we have to come up with concrete quantitative measures to evaluate? Because I think a lot of teachers, instructors across the entire educational spectrum, from K through 12 to higher education, feel that they're in a sense constrained by evaluations, and probably more so in K through 12 than in higher ed. I can say, to hell with evaluations, to hell with what my administrators think of me. I'm going to do what's best for my student. In that respect, my job is probably a lot easier than that of most of the people who are here on this call. So how do we free ourselves from the tyranny of data?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first point I'd make is we really don't have challenges, and we're quite good at what I'll call micro to micro evaluations or assessments. If an informed person is evaluating the work of somebody else, they can usually do a really good job of it. We see that in interviews, we see that in doctoral theses, we see that in things where you really look hard at what we'll stick with student, but what the student has produced or created. It doesn't take a lot of work to know whether it's really great work or good work or whatever. And can that be done at scale? I mean, in my book, I write about New Hampshire, where it was so interesting. It's the best top to bottom rethink of education in our country in the past 20 years, where Maggie Hassan was the governor at the time, and Jenny Berry was the superintendent of public instruction. And they said to the teachers across the state, we hear you. You don't like the way you're being held accountable, your school is being held accountable, your students are being held accountable. Fair enough. Design something better. You tell us what works. And they came up with something that was great, right? They said, we're going to look at authentic examples of student work. We're going to have the schools make those evaluations, great science aptitude, pretty good science, but tied more to like the experiments they create and design, or the ways they apply science, or their ability to teach other kids about science. And then we're going to let others audit your assessments. And so each summer, and I went to some of these sessions, they'd have the groups from every public school across New Hampshire come together. There was kind of the sampling methodology. So you said this student was graded such and such a skill or topic area at this level. Others could evaluate it. They were finding almost no school board could come in, legislators could come in, concerned citizens could come in, but a kind of an audit process based on examples of real work. Now, I've given this exact talk. You might actually feel sorry for me or think I was really stupid if I explained to you in detail how much work I've put in and money I spent trying to bring college admissions officers to their senses. And that has been unbelievably challenging. And so we've got these two gates that are the data-centric gates in the universe. We've got the state mandated exams that keep many kids from passing, getting out of high school. And when you look at those exams, first of all, the big reason kids aren't able to get their high school degree is, of course, high school math. And so these kids, you think about a kid trying to claw their way out of poverty without a high school degree. I mean, you might as well just say to that kid, pick your poison, homelessness or jail, right? It is game over for a kid trying to escape poverty with no high school degree, for the, with a tiny number of exceptions, but that's basically the case. When you look at why they can't, it's because they can't solve simultaneous equations or factor polynomials or define what an imaginary number is, or on and on. You just look at those things and you say, wait a minute. You're like, did I find those interesting? Yes. Did everybody on this call find those interesting? Yes. How many adults deal with imaginary numbers in their daily life? Rounding down would be 0%, right? So we keep kids from getting a high school degree over stuff that they never are going to use as an adult. And we don't, for instance, teach them math in the context of something like financial literacy. And there is amazing math that underlie financial literacy, broadly defined, could cover a whole lot of important math concepts. Ditto college admissions. It's like the more they were focused on Intel Science Fair submissions instead of AP Physics, and I'm probably stepping on some AP Physics teachers' toes here, but the more they were looking at real examples of student work, the more you're going to get better, better kids you're admitting, better quality of, next generation scientists. And so what I've begged, tried, done everything I can is to say to college admissions, you don't have to change everything. Again, I'm a kind of a small steps lead to big change, but every single college admissions office in the country already has in place a path to apply where the main focus is evidence that you can do something really well. And the backup focus is, are you good enough on the other stuff you're not going to flunk out? Okay. And that's called athletics. And I say, why the heck can't you have a special path and let kids submit a portfolio of great accomplishment? And to make it totally real, I gave a talk a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, because I used to travel all the time. So I'm addressing a set of West Virginia legislators and educators. And many of you have seen it. There's a phenomenal, I didn't have anything to do with it, but it is still phenomenal documentary called Science Fair. And one of the kids featured in Science Fair was a kid named Robbie from West Virginia, who hated school, had terrible grades, got incredibly interested in machine learning, and went on to be unbelievable in the Intel Science, went to globals, people were just blown away by Robbie's contributions. And he got turned down by every college he applied to. Every college in West Virginia. I'm sitting there on a stage talking to these legislators, talking to Gordon Gee, talking to all these people saying, do you want Robbie to leave West Virginia? Is this a kid you want to drive out of West Virginia? Because he left West Virginia and without a college degree joined a startup in Silicon Valley and will probably do great things there. But it's like, wait, if the guy can do incredibly original work in machine learning, it doesn't seem like a kid that should get the reject letter from West Virginia University, right? I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me. So, so I think those are the things that sort of impede our progress. But I also feel like, like kids that can start communicating to other people that they can do creative, interesting, great work. Maybe Robbie didn't get into West Virginia University or Marshall or who knows where, but he got a great job at a startup. And I think you're starting to see a lot of people say, let's look for tangible evidence of what they can create and produce and spend a lot less time worrying about their grade point average in a school that they probably hated being in.
Thank you, Ted. So I see I still quite a few hands up, so I'm just going to try to be quiet here and hand it over first to Helen, another core member of the network and an active participant. Helen, floor is yours.
Hello, I'm from England. I've been in the US for 5 years, and it's been a total pleasure to find this group. It's an absolute delight to be part of this. Before I just start, I just wanted to shout out to Eric. I don't know if people have seen that there is a wonderful podcast with Eric Mazur on with Ollie Lovell. I'm just going to put the link in chat. If you haven't seen it, it's glorious. Grab a cup of coffee, put your feet up and listen to that. I'm curious about I really enjoyed your video. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about technical, doing science with your hands and technicians. With science fair projects, what is that? I mean, from England, we don't have them because you do those activities in lessons because that's what science is about. So it's taken me a little while to understand that that's not how it is, and I think it should be. And anyway, we have just redesigned our middle school science curriculum. Actually, we finished on Friday, and our principles are that they should make progress. They should have sufficient knowledge of a range of domains in order to be creative. It should embed the science capital approach. So, for example, when we start talking about why you're learning circuits, it will be how are we going to get a refrigerator that will know when you're out of milk? That will then send a message to the supermarket to say, bring me milk, and a robot that will bring it in and put it in your refrigerator. But it's based on progression because you need knowledge of a range of domains, as I say. So when you were talking about redesigning the middle school, as opposed to the sort of like choice, this is the problem with choice. We have a choice-based thing. So a kiddo comes to me and says, can you tell me about the weak nuclear force? He's an 8th grader. Like, no, frankly, not at the moment. I mean, you need to have so much to learn that. So could you expand on what you meant by this middle school curriculum idea?
Yeah, I'm just curious, where are you residing now?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've got a bunch of, I don't know if you know the Ed Leader 21 folks down there, but Ken Kay and Valerie Greenhill. So you've got some great people in Tucson.
Great people in Arizona. I'm very lucky to be here. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an interesting question, and I love what you're doing. So I mean, like if we had in middle school is a great place to do it. I think things get more siloed and the stakes get higher and people get more nervous in high school, even though I feel like it's that much more important to do it in high school. But middle school is a great place, which is why I think if we started to think about an objective with high school or middle school science of just saying our goal is very simple. We want kids in this to come away incredibly excited about science. That's terrific. And the choice thing is, as I said, it doesn't have to be all of, but it sure should be some of. And so a kid that comes up to you and says that I'm really interested in topic X, and you really want everybody debating and discussing topic Y, you're clearly not going to say, oh, let's drop Y, and now let's spend all our time because this kid raised an interesting question about topic X. That said, like one of the things I've seen is that because if a kid does that 2 or 3 times and they feel like and you would never do it this way, but if they feel like they're being discouraged or the door slammed in some way, then they just stop doing it. And I've seen these great things where they have a topic box or something, this is a great topic. I think we need to, we are going to get to this, or I'm going to find a way to let you go deep on it, or we're going to say, in a month, we'll set aside 20 minutes for you to teach the rest of the class about this topic because you're clearly motivated and interesting. So let's put this in our topic box so it's not lost because it's a great idea in an interesting area. But right now we've got a lot of energy going on around topic Y. And so let's continue to move that and make sure everybody's really bubbling in and participating and feeling like they're getting the essence of that. I think that's a way to handle it versus, so some of you are in the Boston area. It may have changed, and maybe I won't mention the name of the district because it's too sensitive, but I interviewed the district people in one of the highest performing school districts in the Boston area. And they explained to me that each, back to school period, they beg their parents. They say, if you want your kid to really learn about science and really come away engaged about science, we would highly encourage you not to put them in the AP classes. And they said, and the parents routinely ignore that advice. But the second thing that they said they do, which, and again, these are great educators who know the issue, don't want to do this, but do it, is that they won't let people ask questions in their AP courses because it slows down the curriculum coverage. And you just look at that, and this is not an outlier. I mean, I find that in other places where, you can't, particularly the kid that asks a lot of questions is disruptive, so maybe we'll have one question or 2 questions. And you just say, man, think of all that curiosity that's being trampled, right? And I think, and that's my issue. And I know some of you make great progress with it and everything else. But I mean, that's my issue with it. We go after my film, AP US History, so a non-science topic. But I mean, what bullshit, right? I mean, you think about a course that in the number of teaching days goes from 1491 to the present, with 20 minutes on the Constitution and 2 days on the Civil War and 2 days on the Vietnam War and everything. And then you look at the bookstores filled with AP US history flashcards. And then I interviewed all these students and say, what'd you learn in your AP US history class? And they say, I learned I never want to take history again. You know, like, whoa, you know, so when we turn these things into sprawling, you know, sprints through all sorts of minutia, and then really to put a point on it, I had begged, and they've got, you know, you probably know this, but the College Board, a nonprofit, has a cash reserve they've accumulated over the years of over $1 billion. So this is not a needy organization. This is an organization minting money with these tests and test prep materials. I said, you've got all this money. How about this? You know, like, why don't we retest some students who did really well on a bundle of AP courses, retest them 3 months later and see how much they actually retained? I mean, you got $1.2 billion on your balance sheet. You can fund that experiment. That would be interesting. Are they really retaining? Even the kids getting a 5 on their AP courses, are they really retaining it? They're really not very interested in doing that. And I think we know why.
Yeah, for years and years, I've sort of toyed with the ideas. Is let's take physics. Let's take my colleagues at Harvard and give them the AP physics test and see how they're doing. I think the results would be quite shocking, actually, and revealing.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be nowhere near unanimous success. Anyway, 2 more questions. We're 6 minutes left. Ben, you're first, or Benjamin. I apologize if I said your name incorrectly.
That's okay. You can definitely call me Ben. Hi, I'm Ben Spicer. I taught physics in school outside of Pittsburgh for quite some time now. I have a couple of questions and maybe a comment that's going to sound a little bit different than maybe what else has been said this hour. I put some questions in the Perusall too that were related to this. So one of the different viewpoints I have of the movie that isn't just mine, I've watched it with some other people, is that I have probably been in close to 100 physics classrooms in the past 15 years, and none of them look like what you described as being that torturous physics classroom that every kid hates. All of them include lots of peer work, a lot of trying to explain and understand and not just get right answers. And that watching the video, you kind of walk away with this idea of like, why do all these physics teachers have it wrong? Why are they so resistant to doing it? And in all of those 15 classes that 100 classrooms that I've been in, the ones that were even slightly less interactive and student driven, if you will, the obstacle was not the teacher in the classroom. And that, so the video can be viewed as if like, oh, the teachers are the ones that are in the way of this progress. And I also want to step back and say one more thing, and then I'll be done. That concept question that you ask about the hole in the middle, great question. I think I put that there. I remember first seeing that question. I was like 35 years ago, right when I was in middle school, and I've asked that every night at my parents' back to school night. I ask that question for a very specific reason for all of my parents. My reason for that is to help parents understand that right answer is much less important than right reasoning. And so, you do a little experiment, you can show that the hole gets bigger, just like I've worked in shops and cars and all the time, and I could tell you a lot of things that just happen. I could tell you the right answer to a lot of questions. But in a physics classroom, it's much more than that. It's about trying to say, why does it happen this way? So there's that sense of like, when does a physics classroom get to be more than just sort of saying, hey, here's how the world really works, because you don't get a chance to experience this. And when does it become the place where you have to understand why it happens this way? So I just have those two things to say, and then you can respond any which way you want. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. You and I should go visit a bunch of schools together, because you're seeing schools that I see every once in a while, write about and get excited about. But if you're 100 out of 100, I'm 5 out of 100. And when I tour and I've done, like I've been to a lot of places, people who see the film uniformly say, we would love our school to be more like that, but they also say we could never get there. So it's not like they're saying, then this is, as I say, I've got a lot of coverage on this. It's not as though everybody's saying, and we're doing exactly that. I mean, some, which is great. I get excited about it. I write about it. I celebrate it. But, but this is not, and I'd say the second thing is that, it's what you guys do is hard, right? I mean, I'm really in great admiration of what you do, because it takes real expertise and passion and talent to, bring to life some of these topics for kids. And so I'm deeply grateful for the work you do. But there are a lot of schools, school budgets are funded by local real estate taxes to a very large extent. And I would say the number of amazing teachers in our schools where the kids need the most support that percentage is not as high. And so, so that's one of the challenges as well. So anyway, so I hope you're right. If you're totally right and it's happening everywhere, and that I just sort of had this wild statistical fluke in terms of the schools I visited, that would be good. I'd stop doing what I do. I could actually retire. So
I'll just say one more thing based on that. It turns out in the AP classes that I've been in, those are the ones that have been most interactive. So I don't, APB, which is an old course that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe that was the history of AP classes, but the AP classes I've seen are far more interactive, students reasoning, trying to make sense of things than this sort of never ask any questions, never talk to your neighbor, get all the right answer all the time. I haven't witnessed that in the classrooms I've been in, the people I've worked with.
Yeah. So, well, I hope you're right. That would give me a sort of boost of optimism, but I'd say at this point, I'm over 1,000 school visits. And so that's my data set. So
we have 1 more minute and 2 more questions. So I'm going to ask both Jolene and Ms. Monty to ask their questions, and then maybe you can sort of have a, elevator type of response to both, and then we wrap up. I mean, it's very clear that 1 hour is not enough to address this issue. So maybe, Ted, we can ask you to come back and have another discussion to follow up. I mean, because I would love to come to some concrete action. And the more I listen to you and I think about this network, and I think about how many of the physics high school teachers who are members of the network have sort of complained about a sense of isolation. All right. I mean, often they're the only physics teacher in their school district, and there is no ability to really change things. So I think, our agendas are aligned, but coming from two very different, ours meaning the network and yours, Ted, and maybe that we, the sum of us together is more than the part. So Jolene and then Ms. Monty. First, ask your question, and then we'll have, even if the questions are unrelated, we'll give Ted the very difficult task at the end of this hour to try to answer both questions at the same time.
Hi. So tiny background, I have a PhD in physics. I decided I want to teach in inner city high schools because I see a lot of the problems. I also keep getting kicked around high school. So I've been in 3 different high schools in 4 years anyway. But what my question, I wanted to bring this up. I think you've alluded to this, is I think a lot of teachers could be on board with this. Like, I've seen a lot of really good people, and our teaching evaluation system drives out anyone who wants to do anything different. I mean, I can tell you I've been evaluated by 3 different administrators, and none of them have taken a college physics class. So they don't know, right, if I'm doing a good job, other than seeing, did I get a better score on the test? And it's especially bad in the inner city because, right, they are even more being like, we need to get these teachers on this rubric. Why aren't you guys doing your I can statements? Why aren't you doing that? And so then all these teachers where you really need the change, they're the ones being told, no, we don't want you here, as someone who's been told that. And it's just really hard when you want to change so much as a teacher, and the system is not designed to respect people who want to do anything different. So just wondering your thoughts on that.
And then before you reply, Ted, let's ask Ms. Monty to also tell her question. Are you there, Ms. Monty?
Eric, her mic isn't working. She put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the question is in the chat. I don't know if your chat open, Ted, but I'll read it. My comment is, I have read the book. I just believe the teacher has to make the change to teach. I bring love to my classroom and get students excited about learning physics. Yay, that's what we want to hear. Ted, your final remarks.
Yeah, no, it's well, there's a saying that what gets measured is what gets done. And I think I'm pretty clear on what I think about the accountability frameworks that are in place. Two or three things. First, I am definitely a cheerleader for teachers. I just want to make sure that's clear. I'm thinking the only business person to get the Friend of Education Award from NEA. And I just feel like, man, this is you're doing God's work, and these are very challenging times. So I just want to emphasize my gratitude for it. And, but I do hear, a lot, Jolene, that's what I hear from a lot of teachers is, that people will be over their shoulder. And one of the things and oftentimes in a way that makes you just sort of say, either I got to leave, or I'm tired, or I'm just going to keep doing it. But I mean, if you feel like you're the only innovator in a school, it can be very exhausting. So we've done this What School Could Be platform. I'd love everybody here to join it, but it's free. Everything's free. Everything I do is free, but it's like Facebook without the ads and scuzziness. So you could set up your own forum for this group on it, have your own private group to trade notes, or find other science teachers in your community and sort of encourage each other and spool things up. The one thing I'd say is that the advice I always give is, and because I see this over and over again, is if kids can't wait to be in school and their mind is racing, no matter whether you think the state mandated exams or the AP exam is a good, bad, or an indifferent exam, the perceived penalty you're going to pay because you didn't cover every last smidgen of content actually doesn't materialize. That the kid that's thinking about it, that's leaning in, that's enthusiastic, they actually surprise you and go deeper and further on their own than you would have ever imagined. And so I feel like that aspect of student engagement is so important, because a bored kid is not going to learn anything no matter what we try to do. And an engaged kid's going to learn a ton of things. And the more we can support that and energize them. And I do feel that, I think you guys know how to reach me, but tdintersmith@gmail.com. I mean, if there's a subset of this group that wants to try to organize something that could be done kind of supplementally for middle school science classes, so then maybe it's one day a week that really sparks excitement and energy and enthusiasm for science paths, I'd love to help make that happen, and would support it financially and with my own time, because I feel like once kids see how interesting it is, there are so many things that are possible. And the final point I'll make is, oftentimes the kids that are growing up in really well-off circumstances get access to the enrichment programs, the summer programs, the on and on and on. And the kids that are in tougher circumstances, I grew up in tough circumstances, they don't get the access to those same things. And Jolene, thank you for your commitment to helping the kids that need the most help realize their full potential. But I think that at the end of the day, what I find is that the kids that often don't score well on the tests, once they're challenged to take on something they think is interesting, once they're rewarded and valued because they're creative and resourceful, those kids blow us away. And so there's so much potential out there that we could really unleash. And I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. But Eric, so that's it. But I'm happy to come back again. You guys are great. I really am thrilled with what you're doing, and you do such creative things. I'll add one last thing. I was on Obama's transition team. I tried to get on Biden's transition team. I had one goal. I said, you need to get Eric Mazur to be both U.S. Secretary of Education and head of National Science Foundation, and our country will be off to the races. So I didn't get on that transition team, Eric. So you're not in those roles, but that would have been nice.
Well, I think you're giving me way too much credit. And anyway, Ted, thank you so much. I mean, if we were in person, I'd give you a big hug right now. Not because you want me to be Secretary of Education, but because I think everything you said resonates so much with, I think, all of what we as educators deep in our heart, believe in. And and it's so great to see somebody aspire to these wonderful goals. And as I'm listening here to you and to the discussion, I'm thinking, we probably can't get there at once. We need to take small, concrete steps to slowly climb up this huge mountain. And I would love to sit down with you and think of a way of strengthening this effort and growing this network and growing the interest in changing education. There were a lot of really interesting questions in the chat. I'm going to be looking at them and to see if I can send some on to you, and I hope that we can continue the discussion on Perusall and then on your platform as well. I'll make that work. So thank you so much on behalf of all of it. I think it's no understatement. We've run over 8 minutes, which is very unusual. I think we could have run over another hour, but I know that, for Scott in Korea, it's already past 2 a.m. And in Europe, it's dinner time. So, but let's see if we can organize something else to continue this very important discussion, to see if we can take the next step up that climb of the very tall mountain we're trying to climb. I want to thank all of you in the audience for participating with so much energy and enthusiasm. I hope to see you at the next PoLS-T talk. Look for an announcement. I don't have it right now at my hands, but it'll be on the network. And Ted, thank you again so much. I wish it would be a thunderous applause if it was a real room. But thank you so much for coming and spending time with us on a Saturday. Thank you all.
Or Sunday morning, depending on where you are.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everyone. This has been a treat.
Well, thank you all, and
Take
be
care.
well, and see you shortly.
Yep. Take care. Thanks.
Bye.